revenue, the projections that we used for Registry of Deeds began with like a compound annual growth rate. And so we looked at, we threw out COVID years, and we said, tell us, give us an idea of what the annual increases have been in registry revenues, and they came out to over 4%. We said, well, that's a little too, we can't project that kind of growth, right? We have to be more conservative. So what we ended up doing was going to a weighted average approach. We started with 20, we took 23, 24, and 25. We weighted 25 with heaviest factors in order for us to project 26. And then we cut that projection in half to 2.18%. And then we estimated registry revenue for the next 10 years. County tax assessments, is only 2.5%, and that's going to increase. For the court lease, which is another major source of revenue, we took what we've received thus far in Q1 in the current fiscal year. And then we extrapolated that out for the entire year and add 2.5% annual growth thereafter. Health and environment, discussions with both the lab director and actually the test center, Clean Water Center as well. We estimate annual growth of that revenue to be 5%. I think they'd rather us go to 10, but we were, more conservative as we try to estimate the most appropriate revenues. We really, the best practice is to be more conservative and not aggressive in our numbers. IT services, we're proposing a rate study to be completed in 27 and to implement new rates in 28. I think that a rate study has not been completed in IT since somewhere around 2015 or 16. And so certainly time has passed where that would be most appropriate. Investment revenue, we looked at the county maintained $25 million on a constant basis. What would be the interest rate or yield that would be received over each annual fiscal year, and we calculate that out to be 3.25%. And then, as you're aware, we have a new revenue stream with the past couple of years, sheriff retirement reimbursement. So that's currently scheduled $500,000 annually through 2034, and that's constant. So a little picture with regard to revenues. There's a lot of, as you can imagine, there's a lot of numbers that go into these charts. So to show you the numbers would probably be overwhelming. So we decided to show you the charts instead. And the next slide is going to break down the major sources of revenue, which is Registry of Deeds, the court rentals, and then, of course, your assessments. So the Registry of Deeds, as we know, is the major source of revenue for the county. We used a weighted average scenario to estimate the registry's revenue over the next 10 years. Initially, we were using a compounded annual growth rate, but we found that was too aggressive. So we backed down, and I think the results are accurate and conservative as well. The county excise taxes, as we know, can only increase 2.5% on an annual basis. And then the courthouse lease is another major source of revenue for Barnstable County. And as I had mentioned before, we looked at the actuals in the current fiscal year and extrapolated those out, and 2.5% annual growth thereafter. So I'm going to turn the expenditure projection portion of this over to Megan. She was instrumental in providing assistance and managing that part of the equation.
Okay, perfect. So for the expenditures, like we really applied that same method of pulling the historical data and reviewing the trends as revenues as we do to expenses. We further categorized the expenses based on certain groups or departments. And then we started out really with the weighted average for the past 3 years for most of those groups and applied that to the projection. So for salaries, that came out to be about a 6% annual growth each year. Then for certain groups, we applied different methods based on information that we had or based on the specific type of expenses within that group. So for fringe, within fringe, there's retirement. We applied a regression analysis because of the strong relationship between the retirement figures and the salary figures. For early retirement, we knew it was going to be a 4% annual growth rate based on those actuarial assumptions. And for group insurance, the retiree plans have the 12.25% blended rate. And we also utilized a stress to 7 scenario, which based on the current market volatility has a higher percentage increase in the nearer years, and it drops down to 7% throughout the later years in the projection. For our operating, which is mostly kind of like our overall operating expenditures, we did the weighted average each year. And then for our debt, we based that on the existing and authorized but not issued debt and included that $45 million for the PFAS estimated. Our miscellaneous and contingency was mostly the weighted average again, which came out to be the 10% increase for insurance. And any other categories, we looked at those historical trends and used a 2.5% annual growth rate if the trends weren't exactly reliable. And then our other funding sources included the Dredge Enterprise indirect costs at a 2.5% annual growth and our constant transfer to PFAS and OPEB.
Continue without me.
Okay. Me? Okay. Thank you. So this is just an overview of the 10 years by department of projected expenditures. And then we're going to break that down with the major factor of expenditures, which is your salary, your fringe, and then debt. Salary and fringe make up 67% of your expenditures. And so particular attention will need to, I guess, be placed on, you know, those kind of drivers as personnel costs in the future. And we have the debt outlook here. So what we've done here is we've taken all of the existing debt of the county, which is highlighted here in gray. We've added in what has been authorized, but we have not issued that debt yet. And that is in blue. And then the proposed debt, which as we look at future liabilities in the future, you know, the elephant kind of in the room is the PFAS, right? And so we have an estimate of somewhere around $60 million. That's an early estimate. I didn't want to ignore that. As you are aware, $4 million of that was covered from ARPA. $11 million has already been authorized to be borrowed. And so then $45 million was added to the debt outlook. And the first repayment, it would be in 2030. And as you can see, that gray line that exists here represents an estimated 10% of the county's budget, which is really the ceiling and that we would be looking for expenditures.
So that's what that gray line
it is.
That's our 10% cap.
That's your 10%. So you can see in 2030 that has been exceeded. And it's going to be difficult for the county to maintain the services that currently exist without another revenue stream, right?
Right, because what's going to
Or
happen
make decisions
when we get
about.
to 2030, we
That's
have to figure
correct.
out where do we get that money, because that money's not growing on trees. We have
Correct.
to take it out of the operating budget, make deeper reductions. And, you know, that time horizon, that's not that far away.
No,
No, and I
It's
think that what you'll
around the
see
corner.
as we move forward is that that time horizon is much closer than this is showing
Right.
you.
right.
This is why I've been anxious to do this kind of
Mhm.
assessment, because I know we're coming close to the cliff. And we have to make some tough decisions about what stays and what goes.
Yes.
That's the reality of it. We have very, very tough decisions to make in a few years. And I don't think that, quite frankly, the departments are aware of how serious
Right.
the challenges are financially.
So,
This focuses on
Speak.
just the operating projections in terms of revenues and expenditures. It takes very limited account of all of the major liabilities that we're wrestling with in terms of dealing with PFAS, the buildings, and redoing the campus, bringing buildings up to code, and so forth. And that's a pretty big number.
and I think that as has been presented to the commissioners, is that number of, as we call deferred maintenance, is somewhere around $70 million. Now, some of that has been appropriated already, not spent yet, but appropriated. The remaining balance of that is not included here. I included, the PFAS intentionally because I knew it was a liability of the county. Now, we don't know where that's going to go yet, right? But
When you say we don't know where that's going to go,
Go.
what do you mean by that?
well, what it's going to cost.
Oh, exactly. No, we don't
Right.
know.
We don't know.
That's just a placeholder.
Correct. Yes. So as we reach the cliff, here it is.
The cliff is there.
This is the cliff, and
Yeah.
this shows your projected
About
revenues
5 years in the
and your
future.
projected expenses. And so you'll see in the first year for FY27, you've got a small surplus.
Mhm.
And the remaining years, you'll see you have a deficit
Yeah.
where your expenditures are projected to exceed your revenue. And even if we take PFAS out, even if we ignored PFAS, ignore the $45 million that we would be borrowing at 0% interest, paying, back debt repayment starting in 2030 of $2,250,000 a year, you're still in a deficit situation.
Yeah. What do I,
And
go ahead.
and it's not also taking into account the uncertainty of this country, of what is available, what was normally available to us, first from the feds to the state. And we could look to them or both for certain things. We don't have the same playbook as we did before.
Well,
We
yeah.
can't rely on, we can go up there and fight for, there's a lot of money up there, but it might not, it
No,
would happen
we're-
either.
Here's the other thing to keep in mind is that we're in an environment right now where the federal government is shifting more obligations onto local communities.
Yes,
We've talked recently about the public assistance funding and disaster relief for local communities. The federal government is making it clear they're getting out of the business of doing that.
Mhm.
And in some parts of the country, it's devastating local budgets. We will have to we don't know yet how serious the implications of all that are here because we haven't had the kind of storms and natural disasters that other regions have. But for all accounts, the feds are getting out of providing the kind of help that Commissioner Lyons was referencing to. So I think for us, there is the unknown factor that to obviously keep in mind. What I'm trying to figure out is at what point do we start focusing on making the investments in some of the bigger ticket items? Because we're going to have to. We're going to have to have some assessment of the financial implications of the renovation. I know, and many of the projects involving the court complex and the court buildings involve getting reimbursements, but we're going to front money to at least, and we have to cover that for a period of time. So to me, it's going to be taking these projections and then figuring out how we go about tackling the bigger projects, which ones come in first, which ones come in
Exactly.
second, how much debt service does that mean? And then how much, and we'll have to clear out space in order to cover that additional debt service and borrowing costs. So it's almost like making a projection, and it may very well be a placeholder projection, looking at what do we need to set aside from a debt service and borrowing cost aspect of things to cover those other obligations without necessarily making a commitment to actually incurring debt and going in that direction. So how much space do we need to carve out? Because I'd like to be able to say that in looking ahead, we're going to have to reduce current operating budget a certain percentage or a certain amount, at least for the next 5 years, right? So those are the things that I'd like to get to soon, so that we can basically lay out to department heads, your budget has to be reduced. Is it 5% next year, 10% next year, 20% next year? What are the reductions? We're going to have to go through a process where we do a wholesale evaluation of services. What things just we afford to do anymore? I mean, that kind of analysis. So there's some really tough decisions coming down the road. But before you begin, let me just get a clear indicator of the 10-year forecast. What are the annual revenue projections? Is it 2.5% to 3%? What's that number overall? Revenue going up?
Well, we took it category by category or
I know you
revenue
did.
stream by revenue stream.
But-
So I don't have the number of,
Yeah, I'm interested in getting to a point where we can say, here's what our revenue increases are per year and match that up against our projected annual expenditure increases under the current status quo scenario. So we just let things continue to play out as they are. What are we looking at? Because there's clearly a differential,
Oh, yeah.
and it's a significant one.
so I'll get that
Okay.
overall percentage
That'd be great.
increases. Okay. So, the county has amassed some funds in both the undesignated or unreserved fund balance and stabilization funds. And so I'm just providing you with a snapshot here of some of the work that's been completed to set aside funds for particular purposes or for, unforeseen challenges. So that is a factor that we would utilize, I'm sure, moving forward. But it's a one-time fix, and that's the challenge, right?
Yeah.
One-time costs, it's okay if they're funded through undesignated fund balance or stabilization funds. But if it's ongoing operational, it's just not, it's certainly not recommended.
Yeah, it was done once before.
Yeah.
On a regular basis, and there was nothing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think in terms of doing a long-term plan, what should be in it should also be some set of recommendations on how we utilize those reserves
right.
in terms of stabilizing the county's financial picture. There will be some that will argue that we should use those reserves to subsidize the operations, right? That happens in every community. I mean, I get hit with this all the time. Why are we using free cash to subsidize this department or that department or whatever? It's a conversation that goes on everywhere. So our challenge is going to be, how do we
It's just
manage those reserves in such a way that they're consistent with our policies and help us at least mitigate and deal with some of the huge financial pressures that we're under.
Madam Chair, we've had this discussion. I remember previous MMA conferences when the towns were under enormous financial pressure a few years ago, and they came up with a lot of one-time solutions to try to balance their budget. One of them was early retirement. So they sloughed off a bunch of employees and theoretically hired less expensive employees. Then there was talk about, maybe they do, as Mark said, doing less and so on. But I hear what you're saying, Carol, is that if you have your expenses increasing and revenue is not increasing, you can take all these one-time shots, but eventually it's going to catch up with you. Eventually, you can lay off a bunch of employees, but then 2 years down the road, 2 years down the road, that's not going to be enough. So I don't know. I don't have the answer, except the fact is that we as commissioners and you as the finance director have to come up with a solution that where we are obviously our revenue is sufficient to cover our operating expenses. The towns don't have that problem because they simply look at what their expenses are and then they raise revenue accordingly. They jack up the levy. Whereas we're stuck because we only get a certain amount of money. It increases a little bit, but not that much. And so the inflation alone is going to increase over and above that now. As far as the revenue from the registry, that's a crapshoot because nobody could have predicted what's going to happen over the last 5 to 6 years. I mean, I looked at the sales, the real estate sales in the Sunday paper, and there was one property that went for $125 million in Hyannis. I don't know what it is, maybe the mall or something, but no, I mean, I think it's a big challenge. And what Mark says is we have to look at what the county does, what we can afford to do, what we cannot afford to do. But, the thing is, our existence depends on providing services for the town. So the fewer services that we provide and the less benefit we provide to our host communities, the less reason they have to support the county. It's important. People say, well, we don't have to do this, we don't have to do that. Well, there's a lot of things we don't have to do, but our existence depends on doing them, and because nobody else is going to do them. So,
Well, I think the point, you're making an excellent point, because in many cases, the things that we end up doing are things that the state government and the federal government no longer do.
Right.
They more or less dump those responsibilities on the towns. And as a county, we've historically stepped in to help manage that burden. And the dredge department is the perfect example of that. Dredging that used to be done by the Commonwealth. Back in the old days when I worked in municipal government, back in the horse and buggy days,
Yeah, right.
the state government funded all the dredging projects, but they wanted to get out of it. So they gave the county $1 million or so and said, hey, you take care of all of the towns. And we're finding the same thing happening with the federal government. For years, we had a number of federal channels that were maintained by the federal government, and the federal government is no longer taking care of their responsibilities. They're leaving that to the towns in the county. So to some degree, the burden on us is one that to some degree we face a huge challenge in managing. That's why I believe there needs to be some kind of reevaluation on the revenue side. I'm a believer that the assessments need to be more in line with what the cost of services are, that we need to identify what those municipal services are, what the cost is, and look at how we can close the gap between what we're charging and what we're getting in return. Because right now it's a huge gap. So
I could just jump in for a
Go ahead.
minute. One of the, you talk about, for instance, the dredge, but there's also Children's Cove, which is something that we cover that not traditionally covered by the counties. It was covered by, law enforcement and so on. And
there's a whole list of services that we picked up.
But
I wasn't planning on going through the whole laundry list of them, but I was just sort of citing that as an example that oftentimes the towns are burdened. We have to come up with a better game plan though, in terms of how those services that get dropped on us in our communities, how we finance those. That's why the regional housing services, that initiative involving an intermunicipal agreement or intergovernmental agreement, finding ways for the communities to provide some additional revenues to cover some of the extra costs. I think that's the kind of approach we're going to have to take.
What happened was, I'm going to go back to the ARPA funds.
Mhm.
When we gave the towns $10 million, they, most of them, used it to fund their operating budget one way or another. To go back to the towns now and say we want to increase their revenue, I think they should. But unfortunately, their operating budget is be all and label.
But that's a whole separate exercise. This is what we have to do is we have to lay out starting now a game plan on how we're going to meet the structural deficits that are inherent in our budget process. And we have to, the more we delay it, the more difficult it will be. So we have to basically, in looking at this year's budget, start making the initial steps and preparations in terms of addressing this fiscal cliff that we're getting ready to get close to.
The other thing, in addition to this, so you say that, the towns can do what they want, the towns don't have this problem. They can just raise their taxes. Well, they can do overrides. They can only do it 2.5% as well, unless you're doing an override. And we're getting to the point where Wellfleet is a perfect example. They did not have any money to borrow. They couldn't borrow because they had a bad track record. They had nothing. So they were going to for anything that needed to be done for about 5-6 years, they were going to the taxpayer and doing overrides year after year. We were paying for anything that had to be fixed. And even DOR, Department of Revenue, came down and said, you can't keep doing that. You have to have a game plan here. You can go to your people only so long. At a certain point, the pitchforks will come out and say no. And some people don't know what they're paying in tax because they have an accountant. I mean, that's the population we're bringing in here. Whereas we're breaking ourselves in two to do all this development. And a lot of it we can't do until we do hundreds of millions of dollars of wastewater cleanup or provide water treatment. So this is not your problem, but I'm saying this is where we are now in a very bad. Is it worth having? And what do we do when you can't have any more building? That's the growth for towns. So, and Michael and I have talked about this. When you can't build when we're built up, no more building. There's all there is rehab, tear down, build back, build, because there's nothing else, no more land out here. What do we do what do towns do? Then it comes to the economy. So, and you're built out, you can't be building businesses. What are those businesses going to be? How are you going to support some sort of economic development without impairing what we have, So that's another layer. So we are boxing. I mean, the future is closing in a bad way for all of these towns. And they're not seeing that there's going to be a limit for everybody. There's the regular working Joe on this town, on this little burg here is going to say enough. Whereas the rich were like, I mean, in this climate talk, the guy from P-Town was saying, people will build a $3 million house. It'll be there for they've done all this in sort of environmental impact on the coast because they insisted on having it there, and Provincetown's twisting themselves to make sure that happens. And then they go, this is kind of a pain. It's flooding. We had this moving on, and then you're stuck with this. So we're not looking at where we are and what is the reality. I mean, as many towns, I'm saying the towns got to start looking at when is enough, and what do we do once it is enough? When that is over, how do we continue on as a community and not be putting it on? Even this residential transfer and I know it goes everywhere. The residential deferment period. That was all of the second homeowners were fine, but now we're talking 50%. And, it's not like it's bringing in more money. And not every one of them have that house that they can walk away from and their accountant takes care of it. They inherited the house. This was great. This was grandma's. And I have some cash, but now I'm putting it all into this house that's 100 years old or 200, so it's not as clear cut. So what do? We have to start pinpointing billionaires and charge them more, which is what I think would be not the worst thing, but that's not the way of the world here. They seem to be able to do it. So we have a bad way. This is not this. You can't solve this, and neither can we in a conversation. But I think people have to understand there are so many things coming down at us at once, and then we have this. That's if we ever have. And hopefully we think we can have votes in the future and we can vote different things. We might not even have that in the future. So on a national level. So we are heading into a scary
So
future.
these are all the things that we have to do. These are the policy challenges for us as a board, right?
Yeah, we have to think like we're on our own.
For consideration, I mean, I know you'll have, other policy considerations that are certainly not provided here, because there's a vast array.
This is certainly, but it gives us a sense of
Right.
all the different things that we're going to have to wrestle
Right.
with.
And what's the possibility?
And I think the big thing to focus on is making sure that we stick to a structurally balanced budget.
Right.
No more dipping, no more.
Yeah.
Bending the rules.
Mark, how are we going to do that? I mean, if healthcare costs are going up 10%, we're giving people 3% cost of living raises. we can only raise the assessment by 2.5%. We have no idea what we're going to get from the registry of deeds. To say we have a structural balance, it's not structural now, and it's continuing to be less and less structural because our ability to raise revenue doesn't meet
He's making
the increase, the increase in expenses. I mean, this is true of every town. It's been true for ever since the Proposition 2.5 was
Well,
passed.
that is the,
You know, I mean,
We have no choice. We've got to figure this out.
I know.
well, one thing we
Right.
can do, and I put my Bernie Sanders hat on, is let the federal government pay for people's healthcare like they do everywhere else, so we wouldn't get a 10%
Okay.
increase in
You know,
expenses.
he's the man. I agree. People are gonna start listening
But
to him, but
we're not gonna go there, I know, but still.
I wish he was 60 years old. That's
The
what I
buck
would say.
stops here. We have to figure out a way to get through this financial challenge, and that's the challenge. That's what, because no one's going to solve it for us. As I've said before, I mean, counties are not set up to financially manage this situation. We're not set up to be able to manage these operating cost increases at this level, in addition to all of the other capital burdens that we need to basically address. The money's not there. That's the reality of it. So the only place that you can go without doing a lot of these things is basically starting to shrink your operating budget in other areas.
Yeah, but that's a continuing shrinkage. It's not
But I mean-
like we're gonna shrink it tomorrow and then we'll be all set. 5
No,
years,
it's-
10 years from down the road, we're gonna be up
It's
against
an
it.
ongoing process. No,
Right.
but I think what we need to be able to do is, I mean, we set the budget policy, we get recommendations from the administrator, and we have to look at increasingly aggressive budget messages to make sure that we can meet meet our targets in balancing the budget. And it's like I said, it's just, it might seem like it's getting easier, but it's not. It's been easier for us to come together and agree on what we need to do to manage the storm, the difficulties today, but it's only getting worse. So
So we want you
like
to
the-
just solve all this. Figure it out, Carol, and come back.
Yeah.
What do you have?
But this is the chart that you should kind of keep,
That's-
Yeah, I know.
That's the one.
I saw it. I saw
Right?
it.
this is the one, this
Yeah,
is the,
that's it.
this is, what do they say, the money shot, in politics? That's the money shot. This is what we've got to work on. So
Well, that's
we got to
good
blow
job
that up, put a
everywhere.
big poster, put it on the wall. And we just need to be laser focused on how we address this challenge.
But that's a policy decision that has to be made by the people at this table.
You got it.
Not the people at that table.
No, they're
Oh,
gonna
I
give
know.
us,
No,
they're gonna give us recommendations.
Yeah.
They're gonna give us recommendations and guidance in terms of what our options are.
Right,
But we as commissioners need to understand, they're gonna be coming to us,
right.
like at going to the doctor's visit and being told, you're gonna need this procedure,
Right.
that procedure.
And
take
you're
this
not gonna
pill.
be able to do that,
Right,
even though that's your pet project.
right, the things that we're just gonna have to deal with. So I appreciate your,
No, you
Doing
do
this.
incredible work and you really should be able to look at this honestly. I don't know if everybody across the Cape is doing this, and so I really appreciate it because we have to know.
We'll get those percentages for you. And certainly if you would like to look at the numbers, we'd be happy to share.
Okay.
Let us clean up our spreadsheets a little bit
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
we can, I did
Because,
promise,
you know, sometimes numbers blur, so we
Yes.
need some of the walks.
Yes. I did promise, Mr. Abrams that I would share,
Okay.
our projections.
That's great.
And he was so kind to share with me his, template.
Yeah.
And then, Megan went to DOR and we kind of married the two together
is
and.
DOR talking to us?
Yeah,
Do they like
What do
the
they
counties anymore, or are they still?
They,
I'm sure they're impressed with our financial team. Are they up there?
I,
Oh, I'm sure they are. And
Yeah.
the question is DOR is never like, the state's always been biased against counties,
Yeah.
and.
Well, we might be a good role model.
well, I think it's, what helps is if you had connections before,
Right.
that
Right.
they're
Yeah.
helpful.
So-
Okay,
Yeah.
Megan,
Well,
well, thanks
thank you
for
so
joining
It's
the
Mark
team.
Abrams that
Yeah,
that gave us,
good luck to you.
you know,
Thank you.
really those
Yeah.
big kudos on you and
Oh,
then
this
on
isn't
our
too depressing.
report.
Wow.
Several years ago.
Happening everywhere.
So I'm
Okay.
glad you're working with him. He appreciated you from afar, several years ago.
okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Added to my happiness.
So, but I will add, and Megan just sort of offhandedly said it's happening everywhere. It is happening everywhere. The county is certainly not
Oh, no.
alone. And MMA, I think last week or the week before, convened a quick meeting of statewide administrators and managers, just to sort of confirm that healthcare costs, insurance costs, personnel costs are really driving significant increases, which can't be solved by the revenue that's coming in. So it's not just us. It's all over the place.
You know,
And it's good.
I was gonna say, in private industry, inflationary pressures go all the way up to the top. In other words, the company has to pay more people, and they simply have to add that to the cost of the products. So the trouble is with government, that doesn't work that way because people demand that they not pay more, even though the costs that incurred by the government increase. There's no way of passing that cost on. So you've got the situation where, I mean, it's true all over the place in Washington and state houses. Basically, we want the services, but don't tax us. Don't increase the revenues. And, you know, if a company did that, they'd go out of business. But we apparently have to try to figure out some way of putting that square peg into the round hole, and it's difficult. And I don't envy you or us for that matter.
No, we're in. Anyway.
Well, we're in a bind, and a big problem is that just the overall, the way we finance government.
Mhm.
You know, here on the more and more demands are being placed on local communities and the county. And for the towns, it's property taxes. One of the most regressive forms of taxation. And what we're doing is the best mechanism to finance government services is progressive income taxes, right? Put the burden on those that are most with the ability to pay. So there's a huge shift going on here. The cost of government and providing services is going up, but the burden is increasingly placed on the people least able to afford it. And that's a shift happening nationwide, and it's creating huge problems. I can remember, again, back in the horse and buggy days when I was in municipal government, we had lots of help. The tax system was far more progressive, and we had a lot more help from the state and federal government on all sorts of things. There were grant programs to build police stations and help you finance water and wastewater systems. The cost of dealing with capital and infrastructure was a shared burden. If we were back in those days, Commissioner Lyons, we'd be in a much different situation in terms of having to do this. We were briefed not too long ago that the state's dredging program is going to be zeroed out in next year's budget, right? And that will be devastating for the towns. Again, another attempt to shift the burdens on our local communities. And that's where the county comes in. Our job is to help the towns figure out a way to do it. I'm not frightened of the task ahead of us. I think we can manage it, and I think we can succeed. But it's going to require some tough choices.
It's going to require, and it's going to be longer than we think before we see any light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, I think
So it's going to get worse before it gets better.
one of the things, Mark said, one of the things, we exist to regionalize services. And we could make the case to the towns, if we looked into it really carefully, we could say, you know, for a small increase in your assessment, we can provide services that will reduce your costs individually. The problem is, under Proposition 10.5, we're legally constrained from doing that. You know, so I could go to Wellfleet and Chatham and Yarmouth and say, look, we're going to take over some of the stuff you do now, like IT is an example. We do that already, and say, we can save you X number of dollars, but meanwhile, we're going to charge you half of that.
The problem that we have is that in some communities, there's the expectation that when we identify a regional service, that we cover the cost, the 100% of the cost of it. And just the financial structure doesn't work that way. We could do it if we could charge 100% of the cost on the municipal assessments. Then that's a path forward. But the municipal assessments are capped. So we're only enabled.
That's the problem.
That's a problem. I would argue that we should operate. We have the kind of flexibility that the RTAs do. That if there's an agreement among the communities to have an additional service that targets an area that there should be the added flexibility to finance that service through the assessments that towns contribute to. That's what the RTAs do. There's no reason why the counties can't be sort of in a similar situation. But I think what we need to do is to make sure that we can identify with our towns, with our municipal partners, the exact nature of the services that we're providing, and if there's an additional cost that's needed, exactly where that is and how it's equitably being shared, so that people can understand the rhyme and reason behind all this. And I honestly think that we can get there. I really do.
Well, I will say that, you know, in Wellfleet, they're really, it's in a bad way, and it's gonna be a bad way for another 5 years at least before they see their way out of this. But for instance, the IT. So at first they were like, oh, the IT, and you know, they're up there and they're not in sight. And so they were going to break from the IT and get their own in-house person. And once they started to look at those costs, the licensing, the insurance, the cybersecurity, that alone is what sold it, was our level of cybersecurity. And it doesn't mean that we're, you know, infallible, but we got a pretty good firewall built around our stuff. And they just said,
Right.
We gotta go with the guy. You know, this is crazy. What are you thinking? So we can offer those things, even though they are going to be more expensive for everybody
Right.
all around. I mean, it's just really
Well, the
sad.
challenge we're going to have to figure out is how much of that cost do we carry on the operating budget for the county?
Right, exactly.
And how much additional expense is paid for through
Right.
fees and intergovernmental agreements with the communities, how that works out. I think IT can expand, but we just have to we have to just continually use that approach. It's like what we're doing with regional housing services.
Well, we were expanding, but I won't go back in time. However, you know, I do think that towns will start to see that as they're looking at these expenses, they are going to start, and that's where those conversations are going to be vital. I mean, I really feel that when you went directly, you know, the conversations around the dredge and increasing those prices, it wasn't like we just came and said, you know, that was really, that was an exercise of walking people through what transpired here, what was the neglect on our part, what was the neglect of not charging what they should have been charging, and, you know, piecing it together with gum and duct tape and everything else. So, but once you have those very adult conversations with other managers, they understand, and then, well, how can we provide this? What's going to be the price point? And they were all very acceptable about it. Like, okay, you can gradually increase it, or if you go right to the top, I mean, we know what it's going to be, so whatever. And they let it up to us, and we went, okay, let's try it. And nobody screamed. They all knew it was coming, but it went well because it was discussed and hashed out. And I think that's how we're going to have to approach when we want to solve problems with the towns, you know. And it's just not we're throwing it out there. We're increasing this for this reason. That's if we work with them, they'll work with us. Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
Next item,
Next item. We're moving on the agenda. My goodness.
new business.
Yeah, we hashed that out enough. Doomsday.
I have nothing.
New business. No new business. You have a report. I'll just give what I've at the end. So item 8, Commissioner's consent agenda is.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I move to authorize the Commissioner's consent agenda, items 8A through 8I, as listed on our October 22nd, 2025 agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Commissioners' reports. You don't have a report?
I have a report.
Oh, you do?
I do.
Good.
I have a
Let's
report.
have it.
I attended a hack conference / celebration recently at the Wauquasit, and highlighted some of the things they did. It's a great organization, and the county has had the ability to partner with them.
Mhm.
They concentrate a lot on different tiers of housing, especially with people who are really, from people who are homeless to people who are simply seeking to put a roof over their head and so on. And so it was a good celebration, and the county was given its due for the work that we've done.
That's nice.
And, you know, we talk a lot about I would say high-end housing seekers, people who make $180,000, $190,000 and can't afford it. But there's still the primary effort is to get a roof over people's heads, and that's something that HAC and other organizations have been doing. So I think one of the strengths of the county is that we can partner with nonprofit organizations like this to accomplish a lot that we couldn't do on our own. So anyway, it was a good celebration, and they actually served food too, so that was a
Oh,
lot.
that's
you
a good,
go.
that's nice. Yeah, well, it's a good question. It's very good. Mark, anything?
No, I'm pass.
Okay,
Oh, the, yeah, I'll pass.
sure.
No, I just wanted to acknowledge that in the consent agenda were a couple of items that are worth noting. One was the contract agreement involving mass development and the Cape Cod Commission
Mhm.
to be involved in providing support services for the whole master plan update out at Joint Base Cape Cod. That's something that's taken a long time to come together, and I'm pleased that Christie was able to come to an agreement with mass development on the role that the commission will play in helping update master plan. As I've said on numerous occasions, the commission played an instrumental role in the 1998 master planning effort. It was crucial in terms of identifying where investments needed to be made at the installation and a whole range of other opportunities, including a consensus and reaffirmation of support for the installation. And I'd like to see the same thing come out of this effort, is that we identify new opportunities to meet needs out at the base, but also in the communities, and we find ways to collaborate and work together. We at the county, we have huge investments in that installation, particularly the Clean Water Center.
Exactly.
Testing and evaluation of new wastewater technologies to deal with, our water quality problems. So my hope is that at the end of the day, when this master planning work is completed, we'll have a clearer picture of the layout of the county's investments and work that it's doing out there. We'll know what we're doing in terms of a composting and recycling area that Cooperative Extension is helping our Upper Cape towns figure out. And we'll see some other possible opportunities to service both the needs of the military as well as the surrounding community. So I'm glad that this piece of it finally came together, and that's a very important development. I'll make note that we're going to talk about the master planning effort at the November Cape and Islands Municipal Leaders Breakfast, which would be on the 14th or the 12th of November.
Yeah, and that's for the base.
That'll be on the master plan update for the base. Mass
Okay.
development will be there. Hopefully some guard officials will be there. And so make a note on your calendar that November 12th at,
I think I got that.
excuse me, November 14th at the base. Will be, if not at the base, but at Mass Maritime. That's where we'll be, and that's will be the topic. And there has been also a lot of discussion about the new regulations involving energy siting. I don't know if people
Yeah.
are aware of this, but there's been an aggressive effort to revise energy siting guidelines, energy facility siting guidelines, to deal with permitting delays. And the reaction in various parts of the state, the reaction has been somewhat mixed. Many communities feel that they're being sort of circumvented, or their objections and concerns regarding the siting of energy facilities is being sort of cast aside and not given serious consideration. So the Cape and Islands municipal leaders are sending out a notice, I think today, on a forum on Friday at 9 a.m. regarding the new regulations. We've reached out to officials at the Department of Energy Resources and the Energy Facility Siting Council to provide information as to what these new regulations are and what they mean, and there'll be plenty of time for Q&A. So keep a lookout in your emails for a notice from the Cape and Islands Municipal Leaders Association on energy sighting in a forum on Friday at 9 o'clock. It's all gonna be by Zoom.
Oh, good. So send us that, please.
Yeah.
Because if I can do it by Zoom, I will tune in. The thing about, taking away everything, the regulations are being relaxed everywhere. So to get this stuff done, and to a certain degree, I get that. But on the other hand, regulations are there for a reason. And, especially EPA regulations and, community concerns. I understand the community can be unreasonable in stopping some sort of something that can help a progress or even their own health and safety. But they're really being relaxed everywhere, which also gives me pause of concern because we're just like, who cares? So, but I do want to go back to that talk on the impacts of climate change. This is my report. And of course, I made a similar statement that I did to Christy today. And, people stood up and applauded that because, and everybody was like, everybody's afraid to say it. They all see it happening, but nobody wants to go against, like, why are we doing all this housing? I mean, 1,500 units on the Outer Cape. Really? Is that you have to live out there to actually appreciate what the impact of that is. I mean, some places in Wellfleet were a little less than, you're about 2 miles wide, some places 3 miles maximum. A lot of that is the National Seashore. There's one road. I mean, the traffic this last summer was outrageous. And you're going to add year-round people there to keep adding to this traffic and the road runoff and the cars. And it's just really things, we think we're doing great, but then we're going to have to spend a lot of money to clean up what we're doing. So the people that were on that panel were great. And the most interesting one was somebody that you must know, and he does know you, is Mr. Amaru.
Oh, Billy Amaru.
Bill Amaru, fisherman out of Chatham, an intelligent fisherman out
I've
of.
gone fishing with him.
And he wanted to know if you feel like I do. But anyway, I said, go ask him. Anyway, he really got up and said, I've been waiting for someone to say it out loud. When's enough? And so I think that we have to realize that there is a growing realization that we are on this very small little berg, and what are we doing? We're trying to make it something. We're trying to put a size 9 foot into a size 2 shoe, and it's not going to work. The other thing
That sounds like something Bill Amaru would say.
no, that was mine. That was
good.
mine.
Wow.
Yeah, but he agreed. Anyway, the other thing was one of our new health board of health members, did take a tour of the Clean Water Center. And boy, did she get a lot of good information for a young woman who, she's a social worker, so she really wants to make sure her community is good. But she really wrapped her head around the idea of that there are other ways of really kind of doing this. And she just sung the praises of the Clean Water Center. And I'm glad I had someone, I didn't have to do it myself, But anyway, it's making an impact already on our people who have an influence on certain things. So that's a good thing.
Well, the Clean Water Center is going to have a huge impact.
It's going to be
Positive
huge.
and lovely.
That's right. And I do encourage
Among other
towns
towns, but
and
clearly.
boards to schedule a time to get up there and meet with the folks up there and really learn other ways that we might be able to solve this problem in a more thoughtful and economic way.
Madam Chairman,
Yeah.
Of course, I attended the last Cape Cod Municipal Leaders Association. There was discussion about some new legislation facilitate more affordable housing workforce housing up to, 200,000, rather 200% of median income, 250%. And which was, something that we've talked about before, because we have people, for instance, municipal employees and so on, who make a good buck, but they can't afford a house. But then the discussion turned to preferences actually built into the legislation where towns would say, okay, municipal employees, firemen, policemen, teachers would get a preference, would get top of the list. And then they talked about artists, and I can understand that the the senator from Provincetown and so on was interested in helping, and they need help.
They do, but
Once you get down the road, my comment was, we get down the road and giving preferences to certain groups, that I think that's a road we don't want to go down. I think it should be based, I said at the time, and I still say that it should be income based. And if we build workforce housing, that will make that housing available to teachers and firemen and so on, but not that they should get a preference over other people. So that's what I was talking to Christie about. And that was the discussion. It didn't go over well, but
no, I was gonna jump up there and I said, we're gonna run out of time, but I really appreciated that you stepped up and said that. And the thing is, the government doesn't do public housing anymore. And that is what is for affordable low income. And no matter how much you want to build for low income, you're not going to be able to do it without building for market rate, because the developer wants to make something off this. They're not going to do it from the goodness of their heart and give up cash and say, you know what, you're right, I'm going to build this, for a low rate and allow these people. No, they want, so you're building more of what we don't need in order to have 2% of what we do need. So this is why it doesn't work, and we're making believe it's going to, and we're building out, and there's no room for anything, not even a business. So this is where we're not really planning well and really facing the facts that are in front of us, because it's happening fast. Climate change should really direct because it's happening fast.
so maybe we shouldn't rebuild the bridge. Maybe we should just tear it down.
Well, nature is going to take care of a lot of
People have
things
made
here.
that suggestion that we should not have any more people.
Somebody said fill the canal back
Well-
in, and then you'll have more room to fill.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Great idea.
Yeah, I know.
I think it's time to move on.
It is time to move on.
Okay.
We've kicked this around. So upcoming business. We have our little sheet here somewhere.
I have a suggestion for upcoming business, first quarter report on revenues. That's all.
Well-
About that.
Okay. Well, we kind of.
So how does our next meeting look, Michael?
Um,
I'm just
Tee it
sorry.
up.
so you've got, I'll be bringing you sort of capital budget policy proposal for you to look at, and we'll get that underway.
So is this the start of the squeeze?
This will be the start of the squeeze. After today's presentation, I'm not sure how much capital we'll be spending over the next year, but we do have a fair number of projects that are sort of in process and have been in process for a few years. So I suspect that will be most of what you'll be looking at is projects you already know about, know very well about. We had scheduled November 5th for a letter opposing the Coast Guard's proposal to remove buoys. I haven't gotten official word yet, but according to news reports this morning, the Coast Guard has put the brakes on their proposal to remove buoys for the time being. And so, but I'll send out more information on that, obviously, before your
The
November
reports
5th.
that I have are that the revised measure is not nearly as problematic as
Right.
the original one. And I haven't heard a lot of screaming from our harbor masters.
Right. It is not, it's substantially different than their original proposal. And I had the numbers, and I looked up, the impact, and it was pretty minimal. I think there were 3 towns that were
That's what I've been told by
Yeah.
the Yarmouth Harbor Master, who heads up the regional association, which is good. So we may not have something to say.
You may not have to say anything. In fact, there's one report that said they've actually shut the public comment off. But I'll chase that down a little bit. You have my review, which punted from today. We'll do that on the 5th. And then you've got to approve the holiday calendar, and I can talk to you about that between now and your meeting. And then an executive session minutes review coming up. So the other thing that we will probably add to the November 5th meeting is just my proposal to try to streamline some of the budget process. both with the commissioners and with the assembly. So I'll present that at your November 5th meeting.
Have we got, I asked Vera about this, but have we got a budget message from the commissioners? So normally we would have a message, that would contain no new hires, level funded, level services. But I mean, we're going through the budget process now. So what is the instructions given to the department heads?
So they haven't started their operating budgets yet. They've most of the departments are working on capital right now. Your capital budget always comes before your operating budget. So your operating, I think your second meeting in December, the 19th, I'll give you a proposed, well, obviously I'll give it to you beforehand, but I'll give you proposed direction, operating budget direction. So you'll get that. And so that is what's coming up. I'm going to target December 3rd for capital budget presentation and possible approval. And then we'll go from there.
So, I've been trying to be active with Mass Hire, which is now, it's not called that, it's Mass Works, something like that.
Mhm.
And they really are doing a great job there. So I would like to bring Kara and Samantha, her right-hand woman, and come in and give an update, because there is a lot going on for re-education, getting your license. There's a lot of things that are happening for people to up their game in the trades and beyond. And if they want to pursue a more like professional office type. But we do need more of the trades here. We need skilled, licensed people. That is happening with their work through the schools, and with Cape Cod Community College has their own really satellite office there. And a lot of the immigrants, there's a lot of training, a lot of good things are happening. And I want them to get that credit and really get it out there that this is an available resource, because they're not really, I'm sure anybody seeking it on their own will come across it. But on the Outer Cape, we need more attention, that people know. They still have to travel to get there, but eventually maybe we can get some sort of satellite training available down there. And we can talk about those things when they come.
Sounds good.
So if somebody would reach out to them and see what would be a best Wednesday for them, I think they do things on Wednesday. They have a meeting coming up this Friday. I'd like to be able to get there, but I'm not sure if I will. But I'm going to get in touch with them, and we're supposed to have lunch. Anyway, all right, that's that upcoming business. We kind of just had your administrative reports. Vera did a fine job holding the fort together in your absence, and did the staff. I don't think anybody misbehaved. Not that we would tell you anyway. And it's entitled. But anything else that you would like to report to us?
Just a couple things in deference to Ian, who has to
Get out of here.
get out of here pretty quick. I will let you know, we did pull the dredge update off of your agenda today, and there were a couple reasons for that. One reason is the draft Anchor QAA report on permitting challenges has been released, and the Dredge Advisory Board Dredge Advisory Committee met last week before, and they will be putting together a subcommittee to really dig into that report and make recommendations. So I'd like to come back to the commissioners with their recommendations, our internal recommendations, and begin to talk about substantive things that we can do within the dredge program to give it some support and some direction. As you know, we have a new Assembly Speaker, Sue Warner. Delegate Warner was appointed, and we will be meeting with her to go over staff oversight and some internal procedures shortly. The Superior Court renovations, the discussions with the court system is ongoing. Ball is in their court now. They have to make decisions about what other buildings they're going to use. Don't believe the discussions include any of our quote unquote space. on the county complex, they're looking mostly at First District and possibly Plymouth and other areas. So, and then just a reminder that we've got swearing in of AmeriCorps at noon, and then followed by lunch in the Mary Pat conference room. And everything else on my list has already been discussed during your meeting. So,
All right,
I think there was a groundbreaking tomorrow for a
oh,
housing
yes, the housing, is that
I think we-
tomorrow?
that we contributed to.
Orleans? Yes, it's in
We have ARPA
Orleans.
money in it, yeah.
And so we should have, I don't know if I'm gonna make, any of you guys gonna make it? I mean, I
Are
can
you gonna
probably
make-
make it.
can
if
you
I
make
have-
that?
I don't know. I'm got a meeting out at the the military base.
Well, since it's not that far from me, I will try. That's at 9:30.
10 o'clock.
Did you say you were going, Ron?
I would probably, I mean, if,
I think
I want
I
the
said I
county,
was
I
gonna
want the
go.
county
Yeah,
to be
you did.
represented
Okay.
there, so, yeah.
I think I said I was gonna go because I figured somebody would, one of us would show up, and it's nice to be recognized and to see what we just contributed to.
Mhm.
All right. There's only one item left on our
To
agenda.
adjourn.
Do I have a
Second.
second? All in favor?
All right.
Aye. Thank you all. Thank you, everybody, tuning in and for all your work. And Ian, thank you